I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this project has had a little bit of a rough start. So I started by soaking my fiber. If you remember, you're supposed to fill your sink with a few inches of warm water. I did put in the recommended white vinegar, even though you technically don't need it because the Kool-Aid has that citric acid in it. I decided to err on the side of caution and just put that vinegar in anyway. The fiber was a little bit bigger and a little bit fuzzier than I anticipated. That smooth drafting ability that I love so much in Paradise Fiber's unspun fiber backfired a little bit. I usually work in 4-ounce increments, so I kind of forgot how much 8 ounces of top really is. So I pulled it out of the bag. I had this fiber wrapped around my neck. It was hanging down to the floor. It was in the sink. It was a mess. It was shedding all over my work clothes. So I'm gonna have to lint roller myself before I even wash it. But I did eventually get it in the sink. Now I gotta say, you've got to put in a little bit more water than you anticipate. This fiber really soaks in that water. So I had to actually add a little bit more in as well to make sure it could flow around and the water could penetrate all the fibers. Now I did leave it in the sink for about 20 minutes. I didn't really time it. It took me however long to let my 3 dogs out for a little walk, and then I got the rest of my supplies together, and then I got smart and changed in to some old clothes, figuring that I was probably going to end up making a mess considering how everything had gone so far. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn around the camera so you can see what supplies I have set out. So I'm working outside just to be on the safe side. I've got a couple of pots with steamer baskets. Now don't forget, because we are working with Kool-Aid, it is food safe technically, but I do a lot of dyeing with things that are not food safe. So I have my own dedicated dye pots that only get used for fiber and not for cooking. I did realize that, again, that 8 ounces of fiber, once it was wet and out of the bag, there was no way it was going to fit in just one of my steamer pots, so I brought out both, and I'll divide the fiber in half. I also brought out my camera because I just realized that I had completely forgotten to photograph everything like I usually do. So we'll have to have some pictures along the way. I also brought out these cute little cups. They're really kind of like sauce dipping cups. I got them from IKEA. I think they still have them there in case you're interested. And I decided that I am just gonna throw caution into the wind. I've seen some really neat Kool-Aid speckle dyeing videos where instead of making a paste like this how-to suggested, they just used the dried powder, which made more of a speckle effect on yarn, but I'm curious to see what it would do to fiber. So I did leave a little extra water in the fiber. It's not as dry as I would normally make it. So we'll see what happens when we add dry Kool-Aid fiber, dry Kool-Aid powder to the fiber instead of using that suggested paste. We'll see if we regret it later. I did bring out a glove. I usually throw caution to the wind and just end up with dyed fingertips, but since I'm going to be speckling some powder, I figured that the rough tips on my gloves would help that fiber sprinkle and grip really well. Obviously, I've got my fiber in this little glass container, which again is dedicated just to fiber dyeing. This is actually what I used in the past to microwave fiber that I couldn't get the dye to set. So this works really well in the microwave. And then my other favorite tool, this is actually a stainless steel cocktail stirrer that I got off of Amazon. It was part of a set. And I actually really love this for dyeing. When I mix up my dye powders with water, I can use either end. I use it to kind of move the fibers around. I also have a set of tongs, which I didn't bring outside. I might regret that later. But I figured this might be useful in spreading the fiber around and the Kool-Aid around. So just be on the safe side, I grabbed that too. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a minute to divide my fiber in half and spiral them into my steamer baskets. I'll show you what that looks like when I'm all finished. So I finally did something smart, and before I put my fiber in the sink, I made sure that the ends matched up. So that way it was really easy to find the center of the roving to be able to divide it in half. Now I did start to put all of my fiber into the steamer basket, but I was worried that I wouldn't be able to get nice coverage along the entire length. So I ended up pulling out most of the roving and putting it on my tabletop, and then just putting what I could fit on the bottom of the pan inside the steamer basket. So I figure what I'll do is put some powder on the fiber, wind in a little bit more, put on a little more, and keep going until all my fiber is inside the basket. You can see my powders out in the cups. Now again, don't forget, if you're using Kool-Aid and you've gone to the store to get your own supplies, make sure you get the unsweetened Kool-Aid. You do not want any sugar in this. So this is the mango flavor, and this one is the pink lemonade. So let's give it a try, and I'll be back in a moment. So I've added some of the pink lemonade powder. Even though it looked purple in the cup, it really started turning nice pink once I got it on the fiber. I had to be careful because of the holes in my steamer pan. I wanted to make sure I didn't lose too much color. Because we are going for kind of a speckled look, I didn't try to make any sort of even coverage, but I am going to take my cocktail stir, and I'm going to kind of poke the dry powder into the fiber a little bit, just to try to get it to soak up into the damp fiber so it stays in place. Even though I left my fiber a little bit more wet than I normally would, I don't think I had quite enough water on it. I think the Kool-Aid would make a really nice speckling pattern on yarn, but with fiber it's not really going to speckle anyway because you're going to spin it up. I think I would highly recommend leaving a little bit more water in your fiber than even you think. And I might actually go get myself a little spray bottle. I think I'll do that. All right, hang on, I'll be right back. So here we are with the mango. You can see I added a little bit more fiber to my steamer basket, sprinkled on the mango, which is turning out to be this really bright, great orange color. And I did bring out my little mister bottle. I got it, I think, in like the dollar section of Walmart. And I usually use it for getting rid of static electricity when I'm combing out fibers. But I'm just gonna go and give it a little spritz to help make sure all of those speckles are wet and sticking to the fiber. I'm all finished applying my Kool-Aid to my fiber. I just kept wrapping it in, adding a little bit more. I didn't want to try for an all-over coverage. That would have been really light. So instead you can see that I kept it to kind of random concentrated locations to try to get a really saturated color in just a few areas of the roving. Or I guess top, technically, in this case. I did spritz everything down with my water bottle, and I actually ended up using my stir stick to kind of press some of the powder down into the fibers to try to get really, really good contact. So this actually ended up being a really good idea to have out here with me. Now both of my pots already have a couple inches of water in the bottom of them. So I'm going to go pop these on the stove with a lid, and I'm going to steam it for probably about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm not doing this in the microwave, which in that case you need increments of 2 minutes until you see that all the water inside of your plastic wrap is running clear. That means that you've exhausted all of your dye. It's now as much in the fiber as it's going to get. But you do want to let it cool down between those little bursts of heat so you don't burn your yarn, and make sure it stays wet. So I'll also monitor my yarn to make sure I don't run out of water in the bottom of my pot, but because I'll have a lid on it, I don't anticipate that being a problem. So I'll check in with you in a little bit, and I'll give you an update on how it's going. So my wool has been steaming for about 30 minutes, and as you can see, the Kool-Aid powder has really started to soak into the wool. I do have some spots, like right there, where it's still sitting on top of the fiber. So I might give it another little, getting steamed up there, another little spritz with water just to make sure that's really sinking down into the fibers. And I think I'm going to let it go for, I don't know, maybe another 15-20 minutes. And I think at that point we'll be ready to pull it off the stove. So about an hour has passed since I put the top on to steam. And as you can see, it looks like it's pretty well set, if you can see through all the steam on my lens. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the stove, leave the top off, And this is the really hard part. I always want to get right in there and start moving the fiber around and get it rinsed off to see what it looks like. But every time I do that too soon, I regret it. Everything turns out a little bit more felted than I would like it to be. So I'm just going to let it sit here and cool until it is completely cool. I ended up leaving my fiber to cool off in the steamer all of last night, and then I didn't get a chance to wash it this morning before work like I had planned, so it stayed in there all day while I was at work, and then I've just gotten home and gotten the chance to wash out the fiber. I didn't take any pictures of that part because it's really hard to see in my sink. The lighting's not that great. But basically I just put a few inches of cold water into my sink, took my fiber, 1/2 of it at a time, dunked it in, and then just very carefully pressed it into the water. I didn't want to agitate it and felt it. There was no heat, but I still wanted to be really gentle. And actually the Kool-Aid color stayed pretty well. I did have a little bit of kind of a white cloud coming out of some of the spaces where I think some of the extra Kool-Aid additives were coming out of the fiber, but overall I didn't really lose any color, which tells me that it did really set and bind to the fiber itself. I then took it outside. You can see behind me here I have a drying rack, and I just kind of draped it over, and here I'll turn my camera around so you can get a closer view of it. There we go. I love how I got these really great bright pops of color. This again was the mango. And then we find, here we go, we have the pink lemonade made this color. Now I think for my personal taste, if I had done this on cream or a white or a lighter colored wool, I think the colors would have been too bright for my personal preferences. You know, orange is not really my color. But because this wool was already kind of a heathered color with the different browns and grays and tans, that the way it muted the bright colors, it just turned out really, really nice. I kind of wish I had more than 2 packets of Kool-Aid so there'd be a little bit more color. But at the same time, less is more a lot of times. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how much of the color shows up when this fiber finally is spun up into a yarn. Now, one of the things that I've been doing, usually if I wash, you know, say some yarn or something, I would roll it up in a towel to try to press out as much water as I can before I hang it up to dry. In this case, because the fiber really falls apart so nicely even after being dyed and steamed for quite some time, I didn't want to put it in a towel for fear that my fiber would stick to it. So I just squeezed it out really well in the sink. I was careful not to wring it out, just a nice squeeze. And then as I've left it to hang up, I've actually every, I don't know, like 5 minutes or so come out and just squeeze the tips because all the water is running down to the ends quite nicely. And I'm hoping I can get this mostly dried, at least not dripping anymore, before I bring it into the house, and I'll leave it set up probably over the bathtub to let it continue drying. All right, I'll check back in once it's all dry and we start to spin it up. I've got 2 exciting things going on today. First, I'm testing out a new camera. I ended up getting myself one of those GoPro Hero Blacks, so we'll see how that works as comparison to just using photo booth on my computer or my Nikon camera, which I absolutely love for photography, hate it for video recording. So we'll see if this is any better. The other exciting thing that I'm trying out, I have never actually pulled my spinning wheel out on my back deck to spin outside, but it's an absolutely gorgeous day, so I figured I would set myself up out here. You can see my spinning wheel in the background there. I use a Kromsky, I think it's the Interlude, single treadle. I actually really like it. I got that one because it was mid-sized, mid-priced, and it's just been a great workhorse for me. But I am ready to start spinning that roving that we've been dyeing for the last several days. It's Saturday now, so it had a couple days to dry out on the rack. Bone dry, it's absolutely fabulous this time of year when I can actually get wool to dry in a few days. And it looks really neat so far. So this is, let's see if I can turn this around. Here we go. So this is, I'll lay it out. This is a piece of that roving. It's kind of hard to tell because I've chained it together, but you can see these really great pops of color all throughout. And I'm really excited to see how that spins up. My goal is going to be to try to, as I draft it out and I get to these pops of colors, try to keep them together and not let a lot of the undyed wool pull in, so I can keep it really, really nice and crisp. So you can also see that I am reusing those organza bags. Each one of the braid and these two have about 4 ounces total, so about 2 ounces in each bag. So I'm gonna get set up and get spinning, and I'll check back in. So it took me about 2 hours, but here I have 2 ounces of my singles here on my bobbin. And I wish I had stopped earlier in a place where you could see more of the color, but my last layer doesn't have a whole lot. You can see a little, I'm not sure if it's in focus. You can see a little bit right here. You know, I used the dry powder and added water to make it into a paste on the top of the roving. And it gave me really great concentrated pops of color, but I'm kind of wondering now if I would have been better off having a more dilute color spread over more fibers, if that would have given me a little bit more of a pop. Not entirely sure, might have to experiment with that next time, but I'm gonna go ahead and move my spinning wheel back in the house, getting a little toasty out here, and finish up my other 2 ounces. I'll probably end up letting those sit overnight, and then I'll apply them up tomorrow and let you know the results. So this whole project started Wednesday afternoon when I opened up my package from Paradise Fibers, and here we are Sunday afternoon with a finished product. Now I still have the other half of my roving to go, so I've only made 1 skein of yarn, but I wanted to share with you the final verdict. Now I gotta say, I absolutely love the way this yarn turned out, and I think I would have loved it one way or the other because the natural color of the BFL in silk is absolutely fabulous. But I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it in this picture, but I'll add another picture as well. There ended up being some really small, I wouldn't call them pops of color, that's really more of kind of a speckled look. And they don't really stand out too much on the kind of tan colored yarn. In a way, I do like that. I don't really like anything that's really, really super bright and overwhelming, but I do wish you could see it just a little bit more. I think if I tried either some darker colors or something with a little higher of a concentration, you would be able to see it more. But as it is, it just adds a little bit of depth to this already beautiful colorway. And I think this would actually be perfect as a pair of mittens, something where you're gonna be able to see them up close and just be able to admire those little special flecks. But it's an absolutely beautiful yarn. Next to skin softness, but it's going to be a little bit tougher than like a merino because it is the blue-faced Leicester mixed with some silk, and so it's really, really just a lovely yarn, and I can't wait to finish the other half of that roving. Now, how about the Kool-Aid? Will I ever dye with Kool-Aid again? If I'm doing a project with some kids, I think I would definitely consider using the Kool-Aid. It's non-toxic, it's safe, it was super easy, and especially if you did it on a lighter colored yarn, you get something really bright that I think kids would absolutely adore. Am I going to start a line of Kool-Aid dyed fibers in my shop? Probably not. However, I would like to try this technique with some acid dyes. I think you could get a really special yarn using that. So technique, check, definitely would try that. Blue-faced Leicester and silk, check, love that fiber. Kool-Aid if I was working with kids and just with kids. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and then also check out my Instagram at Dirt Floor Fibers, as well as my online store at dirtfloorfibers.com. I'll see you next time, where I'm hopefully going to be washing some fleece if I can get the weather to cooperate.